Yo, what is up? You have found I Like the Blazers. I am your host, Brandon Goldner, and we have yet another non-Blazers related podcast. My brother and I, we started a politics podcast. I put it on the feed last week. I'm doing it again this week. I'm now looking into how I can create its own separate feed. Just wanted to make sure that we're going to keep it going and keep it flowing. But the name has changed. It turns out the podcast name, The Gold Nerds, was already taken by someone else, and we talk about that a little bit in the show. So right now, the current working title is Remember Poli Sci. We'll talk more about that in the show too, but we do talk about the election coming up and kind of the dynamics of that, and also a lot of the kind of judicial challenges, some aspects of this 2020 election, and a whole lot more. Runs about an hour. If you do like it, appreciate some feedback, you can hit me up at GoldnerPDX on Twitter. And again, we're going to create a separate feed for this at some point in the not too distant future. But until that time, I'm going to run it on this feed. So thank you for those who are here for Blazers stuff. You can ignore this one, or there's probably the most important election of your lifetime, or the last few generations come back up in a few days, so maybe give it a listen. But yeah, hopefully it's fun for you as much as it was for us. Appreciate all of you. So without further ado, here is the next episode. I guess what we're calling episode 1, since the first one was the pilot. So episode 1 of what we're now calling Remember Poli Sci. Thank you.
Oh, wait, that's not even the song. All right. We're back on the podcast that my brother and I do, and we've changed the name. Brandon, what have we changed the name to?
I don't know if we're sticking with this, but right now it's called Remember Poli Sci, and we couldn't use the Gold Nerds because apparently there's a podcast that is a fan show of a TV show called The Goldbergs, and their podcast is called The Gold Nerds, so we couldn't use that. So for now, it's called Remember Poli Sci, episode 1.
So what I'm getting from that, and I do like the name, I'll just say that, but what I'm getting from it is you are a West Coast elite who assumes that I've taken a Poli Sci course at some point in my life.
I think it was more about, first of all, it's a Seinfeld reference, and actually, let me just do this.
Even more West Coast elite.
It's super West. Well, actually, it's like, it's based out of New York.
No, they were Nash. Yeah, you're right.
East Coast elite.
You got me.
I'm sure that you all remember this clip from Seinfeld.
Blow it off. Remember Poli Sci? How many of those did we go to?
Okay, I'm going to edit that in right there.
Oh my God, that was an amazing quote, but we didn't have the technology for me to hear it. But you heard it, right?
So I just remembered that. Yeah, I remembered that from I think it's from the Kenny Rogers Roasters episode of Seinfeld. But really, what it is, it's like, remember that class you took in high school and had to take it, and like we understand that like not everyone has like an interest in talking about political stuff, and we do, and so hopefully you can listen to us talk about it, and we can just tell you what to think. That's the goal.
Absolutely. I mean, if everyone would just submit to the will,
agree with us
of my thought.
Actually, my thought. Don't even listen to him. Just listen to me.
No, I think I'm clearly older, wiser. I think a little bit more.
I'm clearly younger. I'm a little more mentally nimble.
Okay, you're taller. I'll give you that. You are taller.
That's true. So remember Poli Sci. That's the working name. It's probably going to change again, but that's what we have for right now.
Okay. I really like it. And, for my show notes, the first bullet point I had says brotherly banter. So I think we've pretty much accomplished that. I want to just quickly say that we had an incredible Halloween party last night. I was doing a lot of spooky voices, and so I am sounding a little bit like I have laryngitis or COVID-19, which I do not.
You could have both, and you would never know. Don't they cancel each other out? No,
yeah,
it's like the Mr. Burns theory, where it's like he has so many different diseases that they're all kind of in perfect balance from The Simpsons.
I wish, man. I wish. So, obviously, let's talk about the GOP elephant in the room, which is...
Wait a minute.
Okay.
We never did, an introduction. We didn't even say who we were. Do we want to do that?
Oh. Yeah, I'm Alex.
I'm Brandon. Okay, we got that out of the way. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I think, and whoever's listening to this, you personally know us right now. But, in the future, when people are going back and we've got, 1,000 subscribers or 2,000 or 50,000, they'll go back and they'll be like, oh, how quaint they started. Like, in this little, Alex was in his attic. Brandon was in his office, whatever.
It's a living room. I am proud of the LED lights that I tracked. Actually, you know what? I wonder if you can see this in the background. The listeners, obviously, you can't hear light unless you're tripping on shrooms, in which case you probably can.
Okay.
Do you see those lights pop on right there? You see that? literally
I
doing
did
that from my phone.
I did the sound effect because it's orange. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, that's now pulsing
Green.
the rainbow. So we had Christmas lights hanging, right? And I bought some LED lights off of evil Amazon, and they were not that expensive, and they look fantastic. I'm super happy with them.
Brandon, I'm sorry. I'm getting a call. It's Jeff Bezos. He just wanted to say thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and focus this down now. There's an election coming up, and it's occurring in 2 motherfucking days, and I have just been, my stomach's been in knots.
There's an election?
I've been a little one. I've been checking news sources constantly. I've been thinking about it. The thing I want to start with is let's just look at the closing arguments of the campaigns here. I think this is just such an interesting election this year. Very atypical in so many ways. I mean, I think on a lot of ways, in many ways, Trump is forced to direct the narrative away from reality because he doesn't want to talk about coronavirus at all. So what have you been hearing, Brandon? What do you think Trump is closing out with this year?
That's the thing. And I don't mean to rip off other people's podcasts, but listening to other podcasts, they did talk about this a little bit too. And in 2016, he had an effective closing argument. And in 2020, he doesn't. So in 2016, it was crooked Hillary. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to be good on the economy. I'm going to be good on trade. America's going to be great again. I'm going to build the wall. I'm going to get you better health care. Get rid of he had all these messages that he had been talking about for the last 2 years. And so your closing message, you're supposed to kind of whittle those down and kind of put the final push behind emphasizing a couple things that sum up your campaign and why people should vote for you. And this year, I don't even know what it is. Is it Hunter Biden? Is it coronavirus doesn't exist? Is it I don't even know. I haven't heard Donald Trump give
the answer is yes.
He hasn't given an affirmative reason for people to vote for him. Is it that he doesn't want black people to be treated equally? I honestly don't know what his closing argument is at all.
Okay, so I don't know where you're coming from with that. Donald Trump is clearly the least racist person that has ever existed.
I've done more for black people.
You can take that back
than anybody except for possibly Abraham Lincoln.
His platinum plan has been endorsed by Lil Wayne, so you just need to stop.
By the way, there's a whole other conversation there about class solidarity. And look,
bam.
If you're very rich, you probably, if you don't care about the racism and the xenophobia and just he's horrible, then you might want to vote for Donald Trump if you're very rich. I actually kind of understand that.
I think you're overanalyzing Lil Wayne. I think it was literally Lil Wayne went to the White House and Trump said some stuff that Lil Wayne liked, oh, you're amazing, you're so important in your community, and Lil Wayne was like, hey, that guy was cool. And yeah, it might be a little bit of I don't want to pay taxes, but I think in show business there's a certain personality where you basically just mix and mingle and you win people over and then you've got another ally. I really think it's as simple as that.
I don't know. There have been a couple other people too, just to really quick, famous, wealthy people who have either endorsed Trump or have kind of pretended to. And I don't know. I think it has something to do with the money. But yeah, anyway.
Well, Brett Favre's been a super fan forever. I know he was one of the people.
He's a racist old white dude.
He's got a really nice haircut. I like it. Just very uniform and looks easy to care for.
Also, should it be pronounced Favre?
I have no idea.
Favre. Why are we saying Favre, even though that is how you're supposed to say it? Anyway, okay, sorry.
Probably however he says it, I would think.
I just think he says it wrong, which explains why he supports Trump.
So, okay, the closing message. Okay, I really do believe that Trump is so steeped in his own universe that he had convinced himself, with the help of some complicit, in quotes, scientific experts in his orbit, that coronavirus was literally over because there was a lull in the summer. I do believe that. And I believe his closing argument was basically founded on that. And now that we're back in the midst of another huge upswing in coronavirus cases, his closing argument makes no sense. But he can't simply reverse course and say, oh yeah, you know what? Coronavirus is a big deal after all, and now I'm going to do XYZ. Because to do that is to admit that he completely dropped the ball and 250,000 Americans are dead because of it. So
you actually think that Trump thought at some point that it wasn't a big deal? Because I don't agree with that.
No, I think he has been able to convince himself, because Trump is sort of a microcosm of what the internet has become, and we'll get into that in detail because I have a lot of animosity towards what the internet has become. I'm going to call it a confirmation bias bubble, right? You decide what you believe, and then you seek out the information that supports that. I think Trump is in...
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I think that's true.
Okay.
I think that's true of people who support Trump. I think that's the message that he wants to give and that people do support. I don't believe that of Trump, and not to drop another Seinfeld reference, but George Costanza did say it's not a lie if you believe it, which is true, but I don't think that's the case with Trump. We have him on the record talking to Bob Woodward saying that it is serious. He knew that it was serious, so I don't buy that it was like a confirmation bias bubble where Trump himself had convinced himself that it wasn't serious. I think he knew, and he literally wanted to try to save the economy, and then after that didn't work, he wanted to save his reputation. I think it's as simple as that.
But I think you're ascribing continuity of concept and thought to Trump, and I don't think he's that deep of a person. I really don't. I think he can
You
easily...
don't have to be deep to lie to people.
I think he can easily change his mind, and I think he's the type of a salesman where I don't think he has... Honestly, I don't think he has any deeply held beliefs other than self-preservation. So I think, yeah, at one point, I mean, you could see him vacillating. I mean, he at one point, started to say, oh, maybe we should wear masks after all. A couple of months ago, I remember saying, hey, congratulations, finally the president mentioned masks. Then he got off that boat again, and then I just read a week ago or something, he mentioned, maybe you should wear a mask when you're close to other people. So I just think the guy's not that deep. But anyway, to get back to our conversation.
Well, I think that supports my point, though. I don't think that it's that he's deep. I think that he literally is just lying about it. Like, I think that's as simple as that. Like, I think he knows it's serious. I think he's been known it's been serious. Like, he's known that for a while.
Well, I don't know.
All right, agree to disagree.
We can't psychoanalyze Trump. Obviously, we can't get inside his brain.
Oh, yes, we can.
Unless you could disguise yourself as a Big Mac and be consumed.
God.
And then so that's the coronavirus part of it. Now the Hunter Biden thing.
Wait. One more thing on coronavirus. I have to say this really quick. Breaking news. So you know how he doesn't listen to Dr. Fauci anymore? He's super listening to Scott Atlas, right?
Yes. Yep.
Advisor on the White House coronavirus task force. Scott Atlas did an interview with a Russian state-owned propaganda news agency. And I just think that is a perfect encapsulation. He had to literally apologize for it earlier today, saying, I'm sorry I did an interview with a Russian propaganda media news arm. It is just so perfect. Those are the kinds of people Trump surrounds himself with. Those are the people Trump's listening to. Those kinds of people.
And Sacha Baron Cohen was not involved in this whatsoever?
Not at all. You'd think that maybe he was, but no. This is a real thing that happened.
There's so much to unpack with that, and I want to go there, but let's table going deeper on that point for just a moment, because so you mentioned the closing arguments for Trump, or I guess I mentioned it, and then now we're analyzing it. So we've got coronavirus, and then we've got the laptop from hell, okay? Let me just ask you, you are an avid consumer of the news, right? You and I are texting constantly about these things. What do you, I haven't asked you to look into this in any depth, but what do you know about this story? It's so difficult to follow.
You haven't asked me to investigate this yet.
Not at all.
Yeah. So I think it's really as simple as this, is that Hunter Biden was hired by a company in Ukraine, right? And I think it's also true that Hunter Biden leveraged his family's name in order to get places, in his professional career. That's something that is not uncommon to him. It's something that people do all the time. It's not great, but it's something that people do. There have been multiple investigations as to whether, because of that maybe Joe Biden himself had something to do with it, or maybe Joe Biden pulled some strings, or maybe Joe Biden fired some people to help his son further his business interests, or maybe Joe Biden somehow profited from this. And none of that has been proven to be true. Quite the opposite. And on top of that, you now have aspects of the story that are shown to be demonstrably not just false, but documents and things have been manufactured. And it's just, I think it's very, very funny. The Republicans were searching for their October surprise in this kind of years old thing that's already been investigated. But now there's new evidence coming to light. and somehow we're supposed to believe that it implicates Joe Biden himself. So that's kind of my 30,000 foot summary of it.
Okay, let's go back in time a little bit. Do you remember, like, a year or more ago, it came out that Trump's personal attorney, Rudolph Giuliani, was heading to Ukraine to go find dirt for Joe Biden? Do you remember when that was a headline? Like over a year ago. Okay. All right. Now, that's not illegal, right? If you have a personal attorney and you want to do some research on a political opponent, some oppo research, that's perfectly legal, right? There's nothing illegal about that. But let me ask you, I just want to pose a question to you. Do you want to live in a world or in a country, Russia, where the only thing that's on the ballot is who's less corrupt? And do you want to live in a country where opposition research is the purpose of a political campaign, and we almost don't have space for issues anymore because we're so busy with what I'm going to call proxy by scandal by proxy? If I can associate you with a dirty dealing from someone else, then you are illegitimate and you are therefore, you shouldn't be in power. You shouldn't have any contact with the power of the state, right? That's basically what's going on here. So this is over a year ago. We know Rudy has been working on this for a long time. I know they thought they had this beautiful Fabergé egg, well decorated with beautiful colors and small gemstones adhered, and they were just getting ready for the perfect moment to unleash this on the public. And it feels to me very much like they thought, if we can just repeat what happened in 2016 with Hillary's emails, we will be successful, right? That's how it feels to me. So the big difference is this time you've got a political candidate, Trump, who's been president for 4 years. So he has a record to run on, first of all, right? Then he's running against someone who is much more well-liked than Hillary Clinton was. In general, generally people do not find Joe Biden offensive. Some people don't feel like he would be their first choice for president, but they're kind of okay with Joe Biden. So they're having a big uphill battle here. Now, what did Rudy Giuliani actually find? What's in the laptop from hell? Okay, the first sort of incriminating email that came out is an email that is supposedly referred to as a smoking gun by Steve Bannon. And it's an email where some Ukrainian businessman says, "Thank you for introducing me to your father." Okay, does that sound incriminating to you?
It can if you're like a paranoid human being. Yes, could sound. It sounds incriminating adjacent is what I would say about it.
How many people have you been introduced to in your life, Brandon?
Quite a few.
It's just like, okay, because someone was introduced to Joe Biden, I'm supposed to believe that is evidence of a political scandal.
Absolutely. If you're those people, and like. So yes, your point is well taken in that is not in and of itself anything, but I think it's enough for people who would like there to be something else for it to kind of point in that direction and confirm their pre-existing beliefs.
So there's one other element to this, but I mean, there's so little there that when they started developing this story, they offered it to the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal said, no, we're not running this, right? They offered it to other media outlets. They were hoping to get it in the New York Times. No, there's really nothing here that we can report on. It finally went to the New York Post.
Well, Fox News declined, which is also important.
That's right.
Fox News declines. Okay. Yeah.
They declined until it was reported elsewhere, and then they reported on the reporting. Sure. And that happens to be the way you install political propaganda into a news cycle, is you get your crap published somewhere, and then you get people talking about it. Hillary's emails, right?
By the way, just a quick aside, can we just remind everybody that Donald Trump was impeached for soliciting foreign interference to, like, can we just remember that happened? So when you're thinking about any of this, remember that is why he was impeached. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And there's so much to unpack there too, because I actually agree with the Trump camp when they say there was no collusion. I don't believe they needed specifically to collude. It was almost as if they were sending each other smoke signals through the international media. Trump making comments, Russia, if you're listening, I don't have any trouble with Putin. I think we're going to get along just great. And Russia's listening to this and thinking, yeah, why wouldn't we want this guy to be president? Why wouldn't we do anything in our power to have this guy be president, right? And so it's up to Americans to decide fundamentally, is that how you want our election system to run? Whoever can court international, I guess, whoever can court the strongest international presence to pollute our news cycle, that person should be in power? Is that really the game we want to play? So the second part of the laptop from hell, which, by the way, was vouched for by a blind computer repairman. That's the source. A blind computer repairman who testified that it was Hunter Biden's. We'll just say that it was. There's some emails with a China energy company, CEFC, and there's a text within those emails that says, quote, 10 held by H for the big guy. That's all it says. Okay, that could mean literally anything. 10 held by H for the big guy. And so Trump alluded to that at the debate. He said, who's the big guy, Joe? Is that you, Joe? Are you the guy getting 10? You remember that? You remember that part of the debate?
Yeah, and I just think it's funny, like you say laptop from hell and you say big guy, and Trump is saying this during the debate as if everyone knows what he's talking about when very few people know what he is talking about. That's also
exactly
funny to me.
Exactly. I mean, it was almost like he was up there quoting, making quotations from the 4th season of a TV show that nobody's seen. And
right.
You're like, what are you talking about, man? So I just think for all those reasons, the Hunter Biden story has fallen flat. The other thing is, it is worn out like an old inner tube, man. They've been beating the drum of Hunter Biden for months and months and months. And it's kind of funny that was their October surprise. It shows that they really had no surprises left. I mean, there were no Easter eggs to be found, basically. They scoured the world. Oswald Cobblepot, Rudy Giuliani, went all around the world looking for whatever he could, and he didn't come up with anything. That's basically what happened.
I think even more than that, again, there have been parts of this story that have been, not all of it, but parts of it that have been proven to be a fabrication by, parties unknown as of right now, right? So it would not surprise me if we later learn that there are parts of this that are part of active disinformation campaigns from other countries, including Russia, to, again, try to sow discord and chaos in this most recent U.S. election. And it's frustrating to see that the tactics that have been used by foreign powers in the past, not just in the U.S., but in other countries, basically to get people to feel uncomfortable, to get people to question the legitimacy of their elections, that this tactic has now been co-opted by American politicians, i.e. Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It's extremely worrying. I know that we're going to talk more about this election, but just to say, it's a problem.
All right, and I have one last thing to say about this. I mean, if you remember the P tapes, do you remember the P tapes?
I've seen the P.
I wish you had. I mean,
somebody has those P tapes. What are the P tapes when you say that? What do you mean?
So Christopher Steele was doing opposition research for Hillary Clinton in the last election, and they came up with this very provocative story that Donald Trump was involved in a scandal, or in a compromising situation, rather, in Russia, where he paid, I guess, prostitutes to urinate, perform the so-called golden shower on a bed in a fancy hotel where he knew Obama had stayed at one point. And the reason this is so, believable in some regards is we know that Donald Trump absolutely hates Barack Obama. We know that, right? It may come back to any number of personal things. I remember at the press correspondence dinner, I'm not sure what year it was, when Obama, do you remember this? Obama made fun of Trump publicly in front of a room of very powerful elite.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What did he say? Do you remember what he said?
Oh, it was a roast, so he was just kind of roasting him. I don't remember the specifics of it.
Yeah, he was like, I got to make some big decisions, but not as big as Donald Trump. He's got to direct Gary Busey to make a salad or something like that. It's
Right.
just like, and I just think, I remember seeing a video clip of that, and it zoomed in on Trump's face, and it was hatred beyond belief. I mean, it was just unbelievable how angry he looked. I would encourage you to find that if you want to. I actually felt bad for him. I mean, he was incredibly embarrassed. So Christopher Steele came up with, this opposition research, and it was unverified. There was no evidence. It was all based on storylines he had collected. And largely, I think people now have decided, you know what, we can't really put a whole lot of stock in that particular information because there's really no evidence, right? So that's kind of gone down in history as a failed scandal, right? The P tapes. I remember when it came out and I was like, man, if that's true, I mean, that's huge. But there was never any evidence of it. So Rudy Giuliani.
I'm still hoping.
Yeah, right. It's a little late now, huh? So Rudy Giuliani was on a Fox Business. I don't even know who was interviewing him. The host was Lisa Kennedy Montgomery. And she says, Rudy, isn't this Hunter Biden thing a little bit like the Christopher Steele stuff? Aren't you acting a little bit like him? And Rudy Giuliani got so pissed. Here's his quote. I wish we could play it, but he said, What you're saying is an outrageous defamation of me, of my reputation. I came on your show in good faith to give you evidence that's being withheld from the American people, and I get defamed? This is the last time we'll be on camera because I don't let people call me Christopher Steele. It's like, okay, dude, can any of these people just accept that other folks are watching what they're doing and it looks very suspicious? I mean, when you react that defensively, it just shows that you're lying, right? I mean, that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And the stuff that we're talking about right now and that you're describing, this doesn't seem like something that should be happening in reality, right? Like if you had told me in 2014 that we'd have a president who would solicit foreign powers to interfere in an election, would surround himself with people who, were just totally incompetent, to say nothing of the fact that they're evil, I just wouldn't have believed it. And it's the thing that is really, really hard is that we've gotten so used to it, right? That it almost seems, really, really difficult or impossible to call out just how unacceptable it is. And it has to do with the Hunter Biden stuff. It has to do with Rudy Giuliani. It has to do with what's happening with the election right now. And I don't know if you're interested in pivoting to that at some point, but I would love to get into kind of the Trump's approach to election night and kind of how he views the upcoming election and how he's going to communicate out and how he's going to deal with the election in a couple days. So
I think we just pivoted.
Okay, that's the pivot.
I mean, my heels
I don't have
are
the
feeling
notes
like
in front of me, so this is Alex spent time creating notes, and I'm an asshole and I don't have them up, so I'm sort of flying a little bit blind, so my apologies.
Yeah, you're that smart, though. I mean, you don't even need to know what I have planned. You can just...
No.
Okay, so let me ask you. I like asking you questions and having you sort of unpack things for me. So, is Trump's plan for this election to win fair and square? Would you say that is his plan?
No, it's not. And here's the thing. It's not his plan to win fair and square. His plan is clearly, again, as we talked about earlier, it's to make people suspicious of the result, to see if he can get enough favorable judges and favorable judgments to steal the presidency. Listen to what he just said. This came out 30 minutes ago. This is from a reporter, Caitlin Collins, and I would like to be CNN White House correspondent Caitlin Collins. President Trump denies he'll declare victory early, but says, quote, "I don't think it's fair that we have to wait for a long period of time after the election. We're going in the night of, as soon as the election is over, we're going in with our lawyers," end quote. Let me ask you a question, Alex. Can you remember an election in the history of ever when every state was complete counting their ballots the night of the election? Do you ever remember that happening?
That is 100% not how elections in this country have ever been run.
It's literally never happened ever.
Republicans have been on the opposite side of this question in the past, waiting for military absentee ballots to come in. So it's hilarious that Trump thinks he can, rewrite history in this way.
Trump celebrated his victory in Michigan. I think it was 3 or 4 days after election night, right? Like, how long did it take to count the ballots and go to the Supreme Court in Florida in the year 2000, right? Like, you don't even have to look at examples like that. Just look at any election ever. The results are not certified for days, sometimes weeks.
So what's really frightening about... Oh, go ahead.
This is so abnormal, right? I mean, this is
You seem so upset, Brandon. And
I am upset, and that's the thing. But it's difficult. I mean, just again to bring it back, it's difficult. You don't want to be the person who cries wolf and who gets upset about everything, but this is extremely upsetting. You have an incumbent president who is saying, I'm going to go in the night of with my lawyers, whether I'm winning or not, and I literally want them to stop counting ballots. That is absolutely unacceptable and upsetting, and people should be furious about it.
So, and you're aware that Brett Kavanaugh recently had and I'm not exactly sure what it was. It was a decision that the Supreme Court decided not to. I don't think they ruled on it. But he made like a little footnote that we don't want to sow confusion in the American public that the election isn't decided on election night.
Or have late ballots coming in and flip the election. You can't flip an election that's not over yet. If you haven't counted.
And why are they choosing to do this during a absolutely unprecedented global pandemic where a record number of people are voting by mail?
Well, let's bring this to yet another topic that's totally related. In Texas, you have a lawsuit that's going to go to federal court tomorrow. Republicans brought a suit because there are 127,000 votes that were cast by people at polling stations in Harris County, which is one of the larger counties in Texas, from their vehicles. Now, just to say, if you've heard this before, when people voted in that way, they had all the same equipment, all the same poll staff as you would have found had you gone inside. And Texas has a little caveat about people who would not like to vote at a polling place, that if you feel that your health could be endangered if you do so, that you can have these alternative ways of voting. This was approved by the Texas Attorney General. There was a lawsuit a month ago with the Texas Supreme Court. They struck it down and said that it was okay. The Texas Supreme Court weighed in again today, struck it down, said it was okay, but it's still going to federal court tomorrow. But the point is that you have ballots that have already been cast, legal ballots by American citizens in a way that Texas law allows, and Republicans are trying to throw them out. That is extremely upsetting. And yeah, like, I should be yelling even louder than I am because it's totally unacceptable and undemocratic.
I feel so much better. That was something I needed to hear right now, honestly. That made me feel a lot better. And that's your job on this podcast.
What part of that made you feel better? You should feel worse.
No, but you put into words this gnawing feeling I have in the pit of my stomach that something is going really, really wrong this election, right? So, I mean, there are many methods by which you can restrict people from voting, right? You can have votes thrown out, and there's plenty of examples of where they're trying to do that. You can have votes not counted, right? There's plenty of examples of that. It's very telling that from the beginning of the year, Trump has been talking about how he wants this election to go to the Supreme Court. Oh, how convenient. He wants it to go to the Supreme Court. He's normalizing. They're setting this up. He's normalizing that elections should be decided in the courts.
Right.
Did we forget that we purport to live in a democracy? Is that where elections are supposed to be decided, in the courts? And are Republicans going along with this? Are they sure they want to go down this path? Because Go ahead.
I think Republicans do, because they understand that their influence is waning, right? Republicans are now a minority party in the U.S., and because of gerrymandering, because of voter suppression, they have maintained political relevance for longer than they ought to have. And so they realize they can't gain more voters. This is how they're going to have to do it. And it is. It's totally upsetting. But like these things, like it's pretty upsetting when you're saying, okay, like the mail has been intentionally slowed down, which it has, right? Like, and so people's ballots don't get there on time. Okay, the ballot doesn't get there before election day, so we're not going to count it. Like that to me is pretty upsetting, but sort of kind of understandable. Like here in Oregon, you do have to have your ballot not just postmarked, but at the county on election day, right? And we've known that for a long time, but in some states they have it differently. It's really upsetting when you go into throwing away votes that have already been cast, and it's really, really upsetting when you go into we shouldn't even be counting the votes. So to your point, yeah, I think that Republicans apparently do think this is a good idea because they don't have any other way to win the election. Moving forward, that's what they see.
They don't have any other way to win this election, perhaps, but I don't feel like they're playing the long game on this. We'll see. I mean, I think if Trump is able to eke out a win here, you're going to see 4 years of unprecedented efforts to further diminish the rights of Americans to vote. I mean, that's clearly the strategy.
Which is why it's so important to vote for Democrats, because we need, like, I'm not even a big rah-rah cheerleader for the Democratic Party. I'm really not. But at least they care about protecting voters' rights, and we do need comprehensive voting reform across the country so that everybody can have the option to vote by mail or have vote by mail available everywhere you get your ballot in advance. And there's none of this fuckery that goes on. I wanted to ask, is it okay if I say one more thing that might make people not feel good and then maybe pivot to something that would make people feel good?
Yes, but let me just make one small addition to what you just said, which is this strategy of restricting vote by mail is completely antithetical to what the Republicans pursued during the Reagan era, where they were all about vote in mailing. They were all about, access to votes because they had a popular political movement.
Who votes by mail more often than not are older people. And older people more often than not vote Republican, by the way.
But so what I'm saying is I'm not even sure that the strategy that they went after mail-in voting is a good one for Republicans. I mean, how much are they going to suppress their own vote? How many of their, elderly voters are really going to want to go to the polls during a unprecedented pandemic when we're in an upswing in whatever state they're in? So
I think that's
I'm not sure that it's really the best political strategy. I'm really not.
I think that's actually a really, really good reminder that all of these efforts to suppress votes, at least, thank God, at the end of the day, your ballot on the outside doesn't say who you voted for, right? Like, anytime they're trying to nix out someone's vote.
I wrote "I hate Trump" on the outside of mine. Dang,
that was a big mistake.
I really shouldn't have done that.
The Secretary of State here in Oregon is a Republican. By the way, she's okay. She's not so bad. But
I don't want to hate on Republicans, dude. I mean, honestly, if Marco Rubio had been,
but the Republican Party are tacitly supporting these things, so yeah, it kind of does suck.
Yes, I'm just saying there are two parties in this country, and we talked about this last time. People don't have a choice.
The Martians
other than
have
those
two parties, like we do. That's a reference.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know why that came to mind. If anyone remembers Attack from Mars, okay. Let me just. I want to get into one more thing to outrage people. Speaking.
I'm so pissed.
And then we're going to go into some more positive stuff, or you can take it in a different direction, or what. The only other thing I wanted to go into after what I'm about to say is give an update on polling and give people reason to feel more comfortable that the result of the election is going to be what it is, with or without all of this legal bullshit. Okay, but there was a Joe Biden bus, right? A campaign bus going through Texas, right? And then a whole bunch of pro-Trump people got on the highway in their cars, surrounded the bus with their cars, slowed the highway down.
You understand there were 100 people in that Trump train. 100 vehicles.
100 vehicles.
That's what I read. 100 vehicles.
There's reporting that
a lot.
Reporting that some of those Trump supporters were trying to ram other cars off the road. Staff on Biden's campaign bus had to call 911, and they had to cancel an event. So this is domestic terrorism. You have a major political party candidate who could not campaign because supporters of another political party's candidate basically ran them off the road. And what did the president say? Trump said that it was very nice. It was very nice what they did to the bus. Well, guess what? The FBI is now investigating this, thankfully, right?
Brandon,
because it's an act of domestic terrorism.
Brandon, I just need to slow you down. They were trying to slow the bus down so they could have a political conversation. They wanted to discuss the healthcare plan. They were really excited. I don't understand where you're coming from with this. I really don't.
Oh man, I want to repeat this point though, that these very nice Trump supporters are now being investigated by the FBI because again,
this is being investigated by terrorism by the deep state. That's what I just heard. So the deep state is looking into these patriots.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. As much as you don't like Trump, he should be able to campaign freely and not be harassed. He should be able to get from event to event. Like we should.
Let me make a point. So I saw that video or a clip of one angle of that event, and one of the big Trump trucks actually ran into another vehicle that had nothing to do with the Biden bus.
Yeah, exactly.
So are they going to be, I mean, that's at least reckless endangerment. I mean, that's a serious crime of some kind, right? I mean,
it's really, really, it's baffling to me. Anyway, I just wanted to get that one piece out because,
let me just ask, why does Trump have to say he can't just ignore it like a normal politician? Like imagine if that happened in Kentucky. Mitch McConnell will just kind of be like, well, I don't have any comment on that, and then it would just be forgotten. Why does Trump have to make it worse by acting like it was a good thing that happened? Why?
Because all Trump understands is activating his base.
Well, they're activated. I mean,
they're highly activated. That's all he understands.
I heard that they slowed the Biden bus down to 20 miles an hour. I mean, can you imagine if you were on that bus, there were 100 cars? I mean, the vehicles decorated in a similar fashion that I've seen in the media are pictures of ISIS vehicles, big trucks with black flags on the back. That's what it looks like on an American highway with Keep America Great or whatever they have. But again, I think you're misreading the situation. I really do.
It's really unsettling. It's another one of those things that I want to crawl out of my skin and shout that this is not okay. This is
quite
not
an
normal.
image. I think you would be listened to for those few minutes before you just died.
I think if I crawled out of my skin, I think I'd be dead almost instantaneously. I feel like I'd bleed out. How is the vasculature connected to your skin tissue? I just don't know.
Well, I mean, you do have a discrete vasculature, but there's a lot of interstitial fluids, and I'm not sure that you could keep your blood pressure going. I mean, I know there's a lot of doctors that listen to this, specifically Cassie.
Let's go off for 10 minutes on this. All right.
Okay, so doctors in the audience, because there may be multiples actually, will you please let us know what you think would happen if Brandon literally jumped out of his skin? I want it would his oncotic pressure drop, and then I have a feeling you would just immediately drop dead. I really do. But I do. Your face, I mean, all the musculature on your face would look so intense without skin. And your eyes would be still kind of bound inside your skull by muscles.
That's good. At least I could see. So I know I don't have the notes. I apologize. I'll just say the only other place that I really wanted to hit was kind of on the state of the race right now, the polling, and again, why people maybe shouldn't be so concerned about whatever the election outcome is being affected by, the courts. So,
okay, so here's the thing, and I know this has been echoed in many outlets, but at this point, who is in control of this election really is still the American people. We do have a system that is fairly well preserved at this time. I mean, there's been a number of favorable court rulings, and I wouldn't say one objection I have to some of the media coverage on this is, it'll say something like, in a win for the Democrats, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rules that they can count votes. That is not a win for the Democrats.
That's not a win for Democrats.
That is a win for democracy because people should be allowed to vote. I think
that's a win for patriots, right? That's a win for American-loving, flag-waving patriots, right?
In the next election, I wonder if democracy itself will be discussed as a campaign issue. Do you support voting, or do you support very restricted access to our democracy, or whatever you want to call it, republic? I just, it's pretty unbelievable where we're going with some of the rhetoric and with the strategy that the Republicans are using. So we'll see where that goes. I'm still thinking of that image of you jumping out of your skin. I'm sorry. It's very distracting.
Yeah. Okay, so the state of the polls, you want to get to that?
So polls. Okay, the polls actually look pretty good for Joe Biden. I think,
Did you say
what is he up?
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden. That's
Joe
from
Biden?
Saturday Night Live. Yeah, it was the Kamala Harris character called him Joe Biden, and I was like, that's awesome. I love
actually.
it.
Okay.
I don't know if it was intentional. I think it was intentional. So I've been calling him Joe Biden.
Okay.
The polls look really good, but we all know, and we learned this painfully in 2016, that national polls mean pretty much nothing, right?
Okay, so then how do the state polls look?
So not many of the states actually matter. This is coming down to a few states. From what I can tell, the important states are Pennsylvania, Vania.
With a bullet.
Arizona, Zona.
With a smaller bullet.
Florida.
With another smaller bullet.
And then there's, various other states that are also in play. Georgia's interesting.
Georgia could be a tipping point state, yeah.
I just read that Montana could be in play, at least for their senatorial race.
Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, but it has like a half of an electoral vote, so we don't really care about. Sorry, Montana, we don't give a shit about you. Okay, it's Pennsylvania.
Dude, that's you just talked shit about Big Sky Country.
Well,
I just want you to know.
I'm not making fun of Bryant Big Country Reeves, who played for the Vancouver Grizzlies at the NBA in 1995. But okay, so you have Pennsylvania, which is like basically. However Pennsylvania goes, so goes the election.
There is a 36% chance that is the tipping point, according to Nate Silver's 538.com.
Okay, and so then you said Arizona, Florida, and then to a lesser extent, like Georgia. And then you have some of these upper Midwestern states that they matter, but they matter less because of the state of the polling right now that shows Joe Biden pretty well ahead.
You're talking about like Wisconsin. You're
Michigan.
talking about Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, I think those states are really in the bag for Joe Biden. I do. I think that those are going to be a win.
So let's talk about that. And I know that people, if they're following, that they have been following, right? And so, but just really, really quickly, when you look at those polls, I'm gonna pull it up really quick. So Wisconsin, okay, Joe Biden's up 8.3. Michigan, 8.2. By the way, when you're up by that much, it would take not just an error in the polling. I mean, it would take, massive fraud or like an earth-shattering news event in order to make it realistic that would go the other way.
Normally the margin of error is plus or minus 4%. That's usually what I see as the accepted margin of error on polls.
You're right about that. And by the way, this goes a little wonky, but when you're averaging many different polls, so we're talking about, Joe Biden's up by this much, we're saying that is the average of several different polls that have been done recently in a particular state. Right. So,
which helps you isolate biases in each individual type of poll. So it's a lot more accurate.
Right. Exactly. General. So, okay, Michigan, Biden's up by 8. Wisconsin, Biden's up by 8. Nevada, Biden's up by, looks like 6. And then
I forgot about Nevada. That was formerly a pretty close battleground state, but I think Biden has run away with it.
I agree. So then you get to Pennsylvania, and this is the one everyone's watching because you're right. Like it's the most likely state to kind of decide the election. And Biden, it shows that he's up by about 5 percentage points. We had a couple of really high quality polls come out actually today. One of them from the New York Times that showed him up 6. One of them from ABC Washington Post that showed him up 7. Those both were released today. Those are really, when we say high quality polls, and again, not to go too far, you're talking about, polls that have a really long history, polls that have large sample sizes. They have really good methodology. They have people calling people on landlines and cell phones, not just like an internet poll, right? Being done.
Let me describe a really well-designed poll here. Okay. A little box on Fox News that has a picture of Joe Biden
97%
with dopey eyes and drooling, and it says, "Do you like Joe Biden?" That's an amazing poll.
Exactly.
That's a great poll right there. That's really good.
Oh my God.
Gonna get high quality data that's very representative of Americans at large with a poll like that.
So let's put it this way. If you take the states that we just said, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Joe Biden is almost all the way there. Any other state that is in Joe Biden's favor, he's up by even more than 8 if we didn't mention that state already, okay? So that's when you get to Pennsylvania, right? So Pennsylvania, he's up by about 5. And then a little bit closer, Arizona, he's up by about 2 and some change. Florida, he's up by about 2. North Carolina, he's up by about 2. Georgia, he's up by about 1. And then you get into your Ohio, it's 50-50. Texas, he's down by about a point. But you notice that after Pennsylvania, you go Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, where Joe Biden has a nominal lead. Again, this is not one poll. This is an average of many polls. The reason why this race is not as close as it was in 2016 is because Joe Biden has had these consistent leads in many different battleground states that some of them are so far outside of what a normal polling error would be that if Trump were to win, the polls would have to be off by way more than they were in 2016. Not just a little bit, but by a lot. So I just want to put that out there.
Trump and his team are not dumb. They have this information in front of them.
Yes.
And they are deciding, all right, this sucks. So shenanigans, right? There's no need for shenanigans if you're about to absolutely decimate your opponent, right? No need. I won a clean election. The most fantastic, incredive election ever. I got the most electoral college votes of all time, right?
Wait for those military votes to come because I love the military. I have 100 generals that support me, all the generals. They say very nice things, very strong things. They very strongly support me. Sorry.
You're really channeling the Alec Baldwin Trump, and I really like it. Let me just say, my favorite of the Trump impressions, have you heard the Trevor Noah Trump impression?
Oh, it's very good.
Because he has that South African accent. It's the most hilarious thing. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So shenanigans are focused on Pennsylvania, but lots of other states too.
Sure.
But Pennsylvania is where we know there will be a legal battle, right? We're pretty certain. I can certainly say, unless it's an absolute landslide blowout, no room for any sort of legal action whatsoever, Trump is going to court in Pennsylvania. Well, even if it's a complete blowout, they might go to court and just argue that people shouldn't be able to vote by mail. That literally may be the strategy.
That argument is probably not going to be particularly persuasive, right? Like,
I hope.
If that's where they go, an argument that says you have to stop counting votes on election day, that's not going to be particularly persuasive. I mean, there's so many reasons why, but another reason are time zones, because people in Hawaii are still voting when it's the next day in New York. Okay, leaving all that aside. Like Pennsylvania, there's some question about votes that were not postmarked before the election that come in a couple days late. And, because of the pandemic, because the mail has been slow. Here's what I want to leave people with. We ticked through a bunch of states where Joe Biden has a medium-sized lead or a small lead. When you think about how many votes it would take to tip an election, it's very, very rare that an election is so close that a couple hundred or a couple thousand or even a couple tens of thousands of votes are going to push it. Remember that in Michigan in 2016, they had the closest election in their state's history, and it was an 11,000 vote margin. What happened in the year 2000 in Florida, where Gore and Bush were separated by just 100 plus votes, that is exceedingly rare. And the fact remains that Joe Biden has a lead in many states that he doesn't even have to win in order to win the presidency. And you would have to have, shenanigans in multiple counties across multiple states that have multiple different ways of running their elections. And I think that people should just take a deep breath that, yes, Trump and Republicans are doing everything they can to cast doubt on the election and, filing spurious lawsuits. But if enough people vote, which so far it looks like enough people will, we're going to have record, turnout's going to be 155 million people and only 135 million people voted in 2016. Then it won't even matter. And I think that's something people can take away from this.
Let me ask you one question. Don't you think on some level what Trump and the Republicans are doing is protecting America from socialism? I mean, isn't it okay to do pretty much anything necessary to keep the socialists from power? Wouldn't you agree with that, Brandon? Or are you a socialist?
It's funny because people ask that question. I mean, there's a famous video of a Trump supporter talking to Steve Bannon, who looks like a collapsed potato. And she literally...
Hey, you know what? I gotta say, you can say whatever you want about Steve Bannon. The dude is extremely focused on what he does, and I do appreciate when he gives interviews because he is actually very insightful. I'll just say that, okay?
Yeah,
Continue
I mean, not everybody who supports Trump is an idiot.
He is not an idiot.
Doesn't make them any less evil. This woman said...
Steve, if you want to come on the show, I would love to interview you, and I promise I won't ask any tough questions.
Steve Bannon. I'll email steve.collapsepotato@gmail.com.
Dude, stop. You're ruining my chances.
This woman said to Steve Bannon and a crowd full of people, this is a couple years ago, she goes, I never thought I would support a dictatorship, but if it were Trump, I would. She didn't just think this. She didn't just say this. She said it in public, on camera. There are people who, to your point, they believe that Democrats, that Joe Biden present an existential threat somehow to the United States, and they will stop at nothing. They will run your car off the highway. They will throw away the votes that you've already cast. They will show up at a polling location with open carry firearms to dissuade you from voting, because that is what some people believe. And that's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, it is to me.
So, I mean, there is a very discernible reason that a lot of people believe that. There's this media outlet called Fox News. Have you ever?
I've never heard of it.
Have you ever?
I've never seen it on in every gymnasium in every small town America, USA ever. No.
Again, we come back to the information bubbles, right? Certain folks have been told for a long time, 10 years, especially since Obama was president, that the Democrats are attempting to steal the country, whatever that means. I am so tired of having these large arguments about who is more or less evil, and I would love to get to a super wonky policy discussion between politicians so that I could make a political decision based on the policies that those folks want to enact. Because Trump doesn't really have, he's made it clear, he's been given ample opportunities to express what his second term agenda is. He does not have one. He does not have a second-term agenda. He doesn't want one. He doesn't think that far ahead.
Doesn't he say there's a beautiful, perfect healthcare plan coming, like any day now?
So when there was criticism, I think it was after it could have been the second debate, there was criticism that he, again, didn't express a second-term agenda. The RNC, did we talk about this last time, came out with that statement that our second-term agenda is to go to Mars, make some sort of a space station on the moon, and then what was it? Free hang gliders for everybody? I can't remember what
the issues that people really care about. The first two were real, Alex. You didn't just make those up. Those were actually what they said.
Right.
Nobody gives a shit about that. People want a job. People don't want to die from a deadly virus. Like, what are they talking about?
What would be safer than Mars? Honestly, if you're on Mars and you're the only guy there, you're good. You're not going to get coronavirus. There is no coronavirus on Mars. I can say that without studying it right now. Okay, so to get back to the polls. Can we talk? I'm really nervous about Washington, D.C. I'm just looking at this, and Biden is up plus 87. It's Trump 6%, Biden 93, and all the polls it's just kind of funny. All the polls are Survey Monkey rating D-, like nobody even cares to, like, everyone knows.
Plus 87. It's so funny to see that. He was only up 65 early last month. So he's widened that gap quite a bit.
He's really consolidated his supporters in DC.
It's wild. I mean, let me ask you a question, because I have been following this more closely than is probably healthy. I actually had to uninstall Twitter from my phone because I was compulsively checking stuff. So I'm kind of glad I did that. As an interested citizen, is there anything, like, leaving all of the court stuff aside, is there any kind of election related, like, poll question or particular state that you're interested in or worried about, or like what questions do you have, like when you're watching on election night? Is there anything that you are going to be watching for or that you wish you had an answer to before you started watching the results come in?
In general, I am just very curious as to whether Trump, who I believe is running the most negative campaign in history, whether he is going to be successful in the last few hours of this election at flipping people's votes. A lot of people have said the cake has been baked. I mean, I've been hearing commentators say this cake has been baked for months now. And I just wonder how much of the horse race that we're being presented with is actually reality, and how much of it really was sort of behind the scenes. The Biden team knows what to expect. The Trump team knows what to expect. And this is going to play out in the courts. That is honestly what I'm worried about. I just worry about that we're setting ourselves up to become a country that would be unrecognizable to where we were when Obama became president. You know, this kind of outsider politician was swept to power. Trump sort of is the same thing, right? He was an outsider politician, very much billed himself as that. I'm just worried that if we go down this route where essentially, you know, Trump claims to be draining the swamp, but if you're able to win an election through a series of lawsuits, how is that not the elite picking their own leader? Explain that to me. I mean, if your preordained outcome is the only function of the courts is to legitimize what you wanted already, and the people really don't have any input, we have become everything that Trump said he was going to eradicate from Washington, right? So I'm going to be watching Pennsylvania very, very closely, and probably drinking a little bit of alcohol, to be honest with you. I'm going to be watching Florida. I mean, a Biden win in Florida early on could shut things down very quickly. A decisive win in Pennsylvania could do the same thing. And there is some possibility that those states could be called early because they're on the East Coast. Like you said, Hawaii is way over there chilling until late into the night. So,
and some of these states are going to report quicker than other states. Pennsylvania is going to be slow. They actually have a law that prevents them from opening or even preparing for tabulation anything that came vote by mail or absentee until the day of the election. Whereas some states like Oregon, if you voted, like, there's a very good chance that your vote has already been like prepared to be run through the machine and counted really quick. But Pennsylvania can't do that. And so it's going to take them days to actually get full results. But some states we're going to know a lot sooner.
Good point.
So
good point.
Here's what I want to say though, to your point about like the kind of the expectation this will be decided in the courts. I think it's important to remind people, again, how many people are voting. So, for example, in 2016 in Pennsylvania, you had 6.1 million people vote in that election. It was very, very close, right? Donald Trump only won Pennsylvania by, 50,000 votes. And that was like, 0.5%. So a very, very close race. Voter turnout is going to be higher in this election. We know that already. You've had, I don't know how many people now across the country have already voted, but it's something like 90 million plus people. And again, I mentioned earlier, the estimates are for 155 million by election day, up to 184 million, I think was the range. Really?
That was
I have not heard that, because it was 135 in 2016. So if it's up to 180, I mean, that is just an incredible amount of turnout. But my point is, when you think about, well, how could the courts throw away votes and how many votes could there be? People, again, are shocked that there's this lawsuit about 100,000 votes in Texas. 100,000 votes could definitely make a difference if it's very, very close in one state. First of all, not all those votes are going to be for one candidate. Second of all, that particular challenge is probably not going to be successful. Third of all, there are many, many states and many, many races. And so I am concerned, and that's why I think Democrats have to have at the top of their agenda for the next 2 years, for the next 4 years, to have a national system to make it easier for people to vote and to get some consistency with these rules. I think that's very, very important. But I think people should just take a breath. And if you're a Joe Biden fan, for example, even if Pennsylvania is taking a while to report, this is my understanding. If Joe Biden wins one of Florida, which will report very, very quickly, or some combination of North Carolina, Georgia, or Arizona, either of those two, it's over. And he's ahead in all of those states and in Pennsylvania. And so anything could happen. Trump could win. But I hope that people, when the stuff's coming in on election day, that people just take a breath and understand the different states. They tabulate the votes differently. They happen more or less quickly. And we're not going to know probably right away. But, if he wins by a lot, then we could. That's a lot of talking. I know. It's very.
My sigh was not directed at what you said specifically. It was just at the situation and where we find ourselves currently. I think Gary Kasparov wrote a really interesting opinion piece in the New York Times about how win or lose, this is going to suck. And I very much am feeling that. I mean, a decisive win by Biden would be helpful for our democracy. I mean, again, I am not the hugest Joe Biden supporter, though I've donated an incredible amount of money to Joe Biden. And it has something to do with the National Democratic Platform. But I think that what Trump is doing is antithetical to the values that we hold dear in this country, that this should be a democracy and that the voters should decide who the leaders are. I do believe that. I feel that. So I think no matter what, prepare yourself for shenanigans. Hopefully, the courts will quickly and decisively deal with whatever shenanigans occur. I don't know. I guess the durability of our institutions is about to be tested once again, and Trump has been very much a shock to the system, and he will continue to be until the day he is swept out of the White House with his wig running behind him. And that's the bottom line.
I would also say too that the shenanigans in the court, even if it doesn't affect this election, that there may be precedent set that could affect future elections. Which again, what's the biggest combatant to judiciaries that make really weird or bad rulings? You pass laws, right? Because the whole way that our system works is that you pass a law, and then if it gets challenged, judges and courts evaluate the intent of the law, the constitutionality of the law. So the best thing that we can do, you and I, is support candidates who support changes in the law to make it easier to vote, to make the rules more consistent, to take out the ambiguity so the intent of the lawmakers is crystal clear and not open to interpretation and not open to being challenged by lawsuits. That's the best thing we can do. Like, that's what I'll keep saying it again and again. Democrats need to make that a talking point, as much as $15 an hour minimum wage, as much as access to health care, as much as protecting the environment have been top line Democratic talking points. I believe that protecting our elections and making it easier for people to vote, that should be a top line Democratic talking point moving forward.
Well, I can think of three very powerful people who may not agree with you, and this may terrify you. One is Brett Kavanaugh, who was one of the litigants in Bush v. Gore. One is John Roberts. Again, he was involved in Bush v. Gore. And then Clarence Thomas is still sitting on the Supreme Court, and he was the deciding vote. So we'll see what those three gentlemen think of whatever lawsuit comes out of Pennsylvania or Florida or Arizona. I don't know, Texas, wherever, it's going to be interesting.
It will. One more thing, and I just, as an after dinner, meant to maybe make people feel a little more comfortable.
Delicious.
Or maybe a little more settled. And polling isn't perfect, but in 2016, at the very end of the race, Clinton was up by about, the poll showed she was up by about 4 points, 44-40. But that left 16% of people undecided or third party. Right now, Biden is up by about 9 points with only 6% undecided. So you think about all the dynamics of 2016, the unpopularity of Hillary Clinton, right? The Comey letter, which definitely changed people's opinions. That race was not only closer by margin, but it was also closer because there were more people who were either voting for a third party or undecided. So when people keep saying the cake is baked, part of that is because more people have already chosen to either vote for Biden or Trump, which is part of the reason why this race has been more stable, more consistent. So, I'm knocking on wood, but I think that we have a lot of data to suggest that this election will go a certain way. It doesn't mean it will go that way, but it's not the same as 2016. People should remember that.
I'm glad you brought up Jim Comey, because there are few folks in America who have allowed both Democrats and Republicans to hate them so thoroughly. He's really an amazing man. It's just incredible.
It's wild that his apparently his wife tried to talk him out of making that evidence public near the end of the election, that the investigation into Hillary Clinton was reopened, that she was like, don't do it.
Yeah, well, how about you follow long-term FBI precedent that you don't release information just before an election that could impact the election?
For that
how about
very
you just
reason.
follow that precedent? I mean, I think it was completely idiotic that he. I understand why he did it. Everyone thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then they would, because it was this idea that we have to present both sides of the issue.
We have to be transparent.
The Republicans have their side, and the Democrats have their side, and I don't want to look like I was biased for Hillary. And since we got these emails from, what was it? It was Anthony Weiner's wife, right, who was doing some campaign work with Hillary Clinton, and there were some emails that ended up to be emails that they had already reviewed. So he felt like he had to put it out there so later they wouldn't be accused of bias. Well, guess what, Jim Comey? Now everyone's accusing you of bias. And I read your book, and it's fantastic. You seem like a good guy, but you done messed up, man. You messed up.
It's actually this could be a different episode unto itself, but it's a really interesting example of you have to think about the impact of your actions. Like, you can't make a moral decision in a vacuum, even if
I totally disagree.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Okay, that's gonna be episode 2. Good.
It's okay. So we're at like an hour and 7 minutes. So if anyone is still listening, you are a super fan, and if you go to www.anbpodcastservicesunited.com and enter the promo code 99217, you will receive
This is all bullshit.
certified inflatable Brandon head that has a collection of 3 or 4 pre-recorded messages to inspire you before an election.
Yo, Halloween's over. No one wants to be scared by that. Well, one more thing. I know we've gone long. Because we're not going to talk again on this podcast until the election, okay? So...
No. We got to do a special election night. I think we should do a special election night on Tuesday. Because otherwise, I'm going to wet the bed. I'm going to be sleepwalking.
Oh, man. I know.
I think we should just do a late night.
Okay.
I'll have to go somewhere quiet so I don't wake up, the kids. They'll be asleep by then. But
you could join by phone if you really needed to, too.
I'm too vain. I need my audio quality to be, at least.
You sound
better.
You sound a little better this week.
Other than my minor laryngitis. Anyway.
Oh my God. All right. That's all I got. Anything else?
I'm done, bro. Later.
All right. Bye.